On March 28, 2026, Philippine and Chinese officials sat down in a room in Fujian, China. On the table, our oil. Oil sitting under waters we legally won at The Hague in 2016. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in that room.
Good morning.
What Marcos said publicly, what China demanded in return, what 6 billion barrels of Philippine oil actually means, and the 3 ways this ends, none of them clean. Let's go. 2 days ago, Quanzhou City, Fujian Province, China. Philippine and Chinese officials sat in back-to-back meetings. The 24th Foreign Ministry consultations and the 11th bilateral consultation mechanism on the South China Sea. 2 meetings. 2 days. The first serious talks in nearly 4 years. The DFA called it initial exchanges on potential oil and gas cooperation. Sound harmless? It is not. In diplomatic language, initial exchanges means we agreed this is on the table. Here is what Marcos said publicly, on the record, just 4 days before the Fujian meeting.
Given the geopolitical chaos, is there reason to think that there needs to be a reset in relations with China?
I think it's certainly going to happen. I don't think that's something that is like an option. It's happening now. There's going to be a very, very serious restructuring. I remember I was watching Prime Minister Wong from Singapore, and he was saying we will have to redraw all of our even our legal relationships in terms of the international law, in terms of all of these things. They will have a lasting effect, and there will have to be a new normal.
That's something we've been talking about for a great deal, but the territorial disputes get in the way of that. Maybe this will provide the impetus for both sides to come to an agreement.
In accordance with international and Philippine national laws, we are proceeding according to our planned route. Request to stay clear from our passage in accordance with collision regulation. Over.
President Marcos Bloomberg, March 24th, 2026. Notice the word he chose. Impetus. Not possibility. Not hope. Impetus. A force strong enough to finally move something that has been stuck for years.
Would you consider developing gas resources with China in the disputed regions, areas in the South China Sea? Is that something you might consider?
That's something that we've been talking about for a great deal. But the territorial disputes will get in the way of that. Maybe this will provide impetus for both sides to come to an agreement.
China responded 2 days later. Calm on the surface, strategic underneath. Setting aside differences and pursuing joint development is the right path to uphold peace and stability in the South China Sea. Chinese Embassy, Manila, March 26, 2026. Setting aside differences. 3 words that do enormous work. Because the difference they want to set aside is our 2016 legal victory. Back in Manila, rumors spread fast. The palace moved quickly to deny everything. Wala po siyang secret deal. Presidential spokesperson, March 29, 2026. No secret deal. But in the same statement, the DFA confirmed the oil talks happened. Officials described them as exploratory, and a bilateral foreign ministers meeting between Secretary Lazaro and China's Wang Yi is now scheduled within the year. Exploratory. Ministers meeting. Within the year. That is not the language of nothing happened. To understand why Marcos flew to Fujian, you need to understand what is happening right now to every Filipino family. 98%. The Philippines imports almost all of its oil. When the United States and Israel struck Iran in late February, and Tehran closed the Strait of Hormuz, that was not an abstract geopolitical event for us. It was a direct hit on our fuel supply. On March 24, Marcos declared a national energy emergency. The first time that has ever happened in Philippine history. 45 days of oil left, and the clock is moving faster every day. People felt it immediately. Diesel crossed 144 peso a liter, gasoline above 100 peso, kerosene at 165 peso. Transport drivers went on strike. Malls cut their operating hours just to save electricity. Government warned inflation could hit double digits. 425 gas stations across the country closed. Not by choice, out of supply. This is not abstract economics. This is daily life getting harder every hour. So here is the situation.
The number of gas stations which closed due to supply constraints has dropped to 365 from the previous 425.
The Philippines is running out of oil. Gas stations are closing. Inflation risks are rising. And beneath the seabed of the West Philippine Sea, inside waters legally recognized as ours, sits one of the largest untapped energy reserves in Asia. That is the real reason Marcos went to Fujian. Let's talk about what is actually sitting under our waters. Because the numbers are extraordinary. 6 billion barrels of oil, 12,000 billion cubic feet of natural gas. Inside our waters. Under international law, ours. Now zoom in further to Recto Bank. Reed Bank, one location. Recto Bank alone could hold more natural gas than the Malampaya field has ever produced. Malampaya has powered Luzon for decades. Think about that. The answer to our energy crisis may already be sitting under our own waters. So why aren't we drilling it? One reason: China. China has prevented the Philippines from exploiting its own oil and gas reserves inside its EEZ through the effective use of threats and coercion, making it seem too risky or costly to engage in legitimate exploration activities. China did not invade. They did not fire a missile. They just made drilling feel too dangerous, too expensive, too risky for years. And now, at the exact moment the Philippines is most desperate, they are offering to help us drill it. This is not the first time we have been here. During the Duterte administration, the Philippines and China got very close to a joint exploration deal. It was discussed, frameworks were drafted, an agreement was reached in 2018 between Xi Jinping and Rodrigo Duterte personally. Then, in 2022, as Duterte was leaving office, the talks collapsed. Constitutional concerns, sovereignty questions. The deal was terminated. Beijing noticed, and Beijing remembered. China was concerned about the Philippines' consistency in previous agreements, citing policy reversals and flip-flopping since initial engagements in 2013. That is why China is now saying, show us sincerity first. And sincerity, in their terms, means stop publicly exposing our ships, stop the live streams, stop calling out Chinese actions in the West Philippine Sea. The Marcos transparency policy, which built enormous international support for the Philippines, is now their bargaining chip. The Philippine Constitution is clear. Natural resources inside Philippine territory are national patrimony. They belong to every Filipino, living and future. Any deal that compromises sovereign rights is unconstitutional. Retired Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio said it plainly. The vast resources of the West Philippine Sea form part of the nation's patrimony, assets that belong not only to today's Filipinos, but to generations yet to come. Failing to defend them would mean surrendering both opportunity and sovereignty.
Below the surface of the water throughout the year. That's contrary to international law. You cannot claim a submerged area beyond your territorial sea as part of your border.
Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio there is one more thing worth saying. More than 50 years ago, during the 1973 oil crisis, the Philippines faced a shockingly similar situation. Fuel prices surged. Imports became uncertain. The country struggled with its heavy dependence on foreign oil. That president was Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Today, half a century later, same crisis, same surname, same unresolved vulnerability. History does not repeat, but sometimes it rhymes very closely. So where does this go? There are three paths. None of them are easy. None of them are clean. China gets access. The Philippines gets oil. In the short term, the crisis eases. Fuel prices stabilize. The pressure comes down. But in the long term, the 2016 arbitral ruling is quietly weakened. Future governments inherit a harder position to defend. The U.S. alliance is tested. And China establishes a precedent that the right crisis at the right moment can unlock what years of military pressure could not. China's demand to show sincerity is really a demand to go quiet. The Marcos administration cannot do that without losing domestic legitimacy and the international support it has built. So talks break down. Again, the energy crisis deepens. Inflation hits double digits. China watches. and waits for the next crisis. Both sides agree to continue exploring cooperation. Committees are formed. A foreign ministers' meeting happens. Statements are issued about confidence building. But no real drilling begins. No binding agreement takes shape. The Philippines buys oil from Russia instead. Tensions in the West Philippine Sea resume unresolved, as always. The reopening of talks is very late in the day, and it is not clear whether Manila's renewed engagement would be sustained. All three scenarios share one truth. None of them solve the actual problem. The Philippines' energy dependence, unchanged since 1973, remains unresolved. Here is what I believe. The Philippines is in a desperate situation, not of its own making. The energy crisis is real. The pain is real. 144 peso diesel is real. 425 closed gas stations is real. 45 days on the clock is real. But history has a very clear lesson about what happens when the Philippines negotiates with China from a position of desperation. We have done it before, with Scarborough Shoal in 2012, with the 2018 Duterte deal. Both times, we bent toward Beijing. Both times, we gained nothing. And both times, we lost ground we have never recovered. The question here is not whether Marcos should talk to China. The question is, what is he willing to give away to end this crisis? Because China already knows the answer. They set this price before the talks even started. I want to know what you think. Should Marcos do a deal with China on the West Philippine Sea oil? Yes. We need the energy. Or no, not at the cost of our sovereignty. Tell me in the comments. And if you want to follow this story as it develops, because it will, make sure you are subscribed. I will have the next update the moment something moves. Marcos just flew to China for secret oil talks. The West Philippine Sea holds 6 billion barrels of oil. Oil that belongs to us under international law. We won it at The Hague in 2016. We are 45 days from running out of fuel. Gas stations are already closing. Diesel is 144 peso a liter. And China is saying, we will help you drill it. But first, show us sincerity. Stop exposing our ships. Go quiet. Is this a deal or a surrender?